When the guns finally fell silent in Laos in 1975, the country stood at a crossroads. For decades, the landlocked nation had been caught between great powers, civil war, and Cold War rivalries. The Lao Civil War, also known as the Secret War, had pitted royalist forces and their American allies against the communist Pathet Lao, supported by North Vietnam and the Soviet Union. By the time it ended, the monarchy had fallen, the Pathet Lao had seized power, and Laos entered a new era under communist rule. The immediate aftermath of the war was marked by dramatic political change. For centuries, Laos had been ruled by kings, from the Lan Xang kingdom in the 14th century to the constitutional monarchy that survived into the modern era. That all came to an abrupt end on December 2, 1975, when the Pathet Lao proclaimed the Lao People's Democratic Republic. King Savangbatthana was forced to abdicate, the monarchy was abolished, and the communist movement officially took control of the entire country. The new government was closely aligned with its allies in Hanoi. Laos became a one-party socialist state under the Lao People's Revolutionary Party. Decisions were centralized, political opposition was eliminated, and the country entered into a period of close cooperation with Vietnam, which stationed troops inside Laos well into the 1980s. For many, this was seen as the beginning of a new chapter, one in which Laos would follow the socialist model of its neighbors. For others, it meant uncertainty, repression, and exile. Life for the royal family took a tragic turn. After his abdication, King Savangbatthana, along with Queen Kamphui and Crown Prince Vong Savang, were sent to re-education camps in remote parts of the country. The government claimed they were being retrained as ordinary citizens, but reports suggest that they lived under harsh conditions, performing manual labor, with limited food and medical care. It is widely believed that the king and his family died in captivity in the late 1970s or early 1980s, though the exact details remain uncertain. The fate of the monarchy symbolized the sweeping break with the past that Laos had undergone. The establishment of communist rule also sparked a large-scale exodus. Many members of the educated elite, former officials, and families who feared reprisals fled the country. Over the following years, hundreds of thousands of Laotians made their way across the Mekong River into Thailand, often risking their lives in the process. These refugees eventually resettled in countries like the United States, France, Canada, and Australia. The Lao diaspora would go on to play an important role in preserving cultural traditions abroad while also maintaining ties to their homeland. For those who remained in Laos, the years after the war were challenging. The country was one of the poorest in the world, devastated by years of conflict and heavily bombed during the Vietnam War. Infrastructure was limited, agriculture was disrupted, and industry was virtually non-existent. The new government attempted to restructure the economy along socialist lines, including collectivizing farms and nationalizing businesses. However, these policies proved difficult to implement, especially in a country with a predominantly rural and subsistence-based population. Agricultural productivity dropped, food shortages became common, and discontent grew in many areas. The 1980s saw Laos increasingly dependent on Vietnam and the Soviet Union for economic and military support. Vietnamese advisors played a key role in government institutions, while Soviet aid helped sustain basic infrastructure. This period also saw the suppression of dissent. Those suspected of opposing the government could be sent to re-education camps, and freedom of expression was tightly controlled. Despite this, the leadership justified its actions as necessary for building a socialist state and securing stability after decades of war. One of the most visible legacies of the conflict was the presence of unexploded ordnance, or UXO. During the Vietnam War, Laos had been bombed more heavily per capita than any other country in history. Millions of cluster munitions failed to detonate, leaving behind a deadly legacy in fields, villages, and forests. After the war, this made farming dangerous and slowed economic recovery. Even today, unexploded bombs remain a serious issue, with international organizations working to clear contaminated land. By the mid-1980s, global events began to reshape Laos. The Soviet Union, once a reliable source of aid, was in decline, and Vietnam was struggling economically. Facing stagnation and isolation, Laos began to reconsider its strict socialist policies. In 1986, the government introduced the new economic mechanism, a series of reforms aimed at opening up the economy. These reforms relaxed state control, allowed more private enterprise, and encouraged foreign investment. While Laos remained under one-party rule, these changes marked a shift away from rigid central planning. The reforms slowly began to show results. Agriculture improved as farmers were given more autonomy, trade expanded, and foreign companies began to invest in infrastructure and resource projects. Laos still faced immense challenges, including poverty, limited education, and a lack of skilled workers, but the shift signaled the country's willingness to adapt. Importantly, it also marked a move toward engaging with the wider world, including neighboring Thailand and members of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. The relationship between Laos and Vietnam remained central, but over time, Laos diversified its international partnerships. Thailand became an important trading partner, China expanded its influence through investment, and Western countries began to provide aid and assistance. By the 1990s, Laos joined ASEAN, further integrating itself into the regional community. While the government continued to maintain strict political control, these steps helped improve the country's economic prospects. The legacy of the Lao Civil War, however, continued to shape society. The division between those who stayed and those who fled left lasting scars. The diaspora communities abroad sometimes voiced criticism of the government, while those inside Laos adjusted to life under one-party rule. Generational change gradually softened some of the tensions, but memories of war, displacement, and re-education camps have not been forgotten. In terms of culture and identity, the years after 1975 were also significant. The government promoted a sense of national unity centered on Lao identity, while recognizing the country's ethnic diversity. Buddhism, which had long been central to Lao culture, was allowed to continue, though under supervision. Traditional festivals, music, and art were preserved, though sometimes reshaped to fit the socialist narrative. At the same time, modernization and urbanization slowly began to influence daily life, particularly in Vientiane and other major towns. By the early 2000s, Laos had made strides in development, though it remained one of Southeast Asia's least developed countries. The government pursued large infrastructure projects, often with foreign assistance, including the construction of dams, roads, and later railways. Tourism began to grow, with visitors drawn to the natural beauty, Buddhist temples, and French colonial architecture. While poverty was still widespread, the country was gradually moving toward greater stability and connectivity with the outside world. The communist rule that began in 1975 continues today, with the Lao People's Revolutionary Party maintaining firm control over politics and society. Elections are held, but only within the framework of the one-party system. Political dissent remains limited, though economic liberalization has brought about social changes and a growing middle class in urban areas. The government has emphasized development goals, aiming to lift Laos out of its status as a least developed country and integrate further with regional economies. Looking back, the aftermath of the Lao Civil War and the establishment of communist rule in 1975 marked one of the most transformative moments in the nation's history. It was a period of loss and hardship, but also one of adaptation and resilience. From the fall of the monarchy to the rise of a socialist state, from isolation to cautious engagement with the world, Laos has charted a complex path through the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Today, the country still bears the marks of its past. The memories of war, displacement, and political upheaval remain part of the national consciousness. Yet Laos also stands as a country that has managed to preserve its cultural heritage, maintain stability, and pursue development despite immense challenges. The story of Laos under communist rule is therefore not only about ideology or politics, but also about endurance, survival, and the ongoing search for a better future. Thanks for watching. Did we miss something? Let us know in the comments.